3 of the 2020 Motul FIM Superbike World Championship reaches its climax, race 2 from the Motul Portuguese round. With 25 races around the Algarve International Circuit already under our belts, we now know exactly what to expect, and the only remaining question this weekend is, to what extent can Jonathan Rea capitalise on territory that he's dominated in recent seasons? The Blind Crest, spectacular drops and high speeds around this 4.5-kilometre circuit have earned it the tag of the roller coaster, a contemporary classic. The venue was constructed in just 8 months and opened with World Superbikes back in 2008. None other than Jonathan Rea made his debut that weekend. 15 corners and a real technical challenge. This is a place where the rider can make the difference, as we've seen both last season and in yesterday's race 1. The number 1 overtaking hotspot riders build up speed through the long right-handers at the end of the lap onto the 965-metre start-finish straight, dropping down and through into the braking zone of turn 1. Charles Davies made his way through nicely on Xavi Forres yesterday into turn 5. Another downhill overtaking hotspot. The tarmac joins and the bumps on the entry make that a risky move. The toughest of all, turn 11. Alvaro Bautista caught then teammate Charles Davies by surprise in the Superpole race here last season. His 2020 replacement, Scott Redding, was not to be outdone as he picked off Alex Lowe's for 5th here yesterday. No less than 5 riders in today's field have been race winners here, but this has been Jonathan Rea's territory since joining KRT, and he holds the lap record from his win in the 2019 Superpole race. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Algarve International Circuit for the 3rd and final Superbike race of the weekend. Jonathan Rea won the last 5 races of the 2019 season to claim his 5th world title, but it's been far from plain sailing so far in defence of that crown. Once again, a whole host of contenders for the podium places at race 2 of the Motul Portuguese round. Steve English alongside me, consistency a whole lot more difficult for all of the leaders in 2020, but if there is one constant, it's Jonathan Rea's level of performance here in Portimao.
Yeah, consistency is going to be a challenge for everyone because it's so much more condensed at the top of the WorldSBK field. We've been able to see lots of riders challenging for podiums throughout the course of this season so far, and interestingly what we saw in the Superpole race was the likes of Loris Baz getting onto that podium for the first time. That's going to give him confidence. Be interesting to see if he's able to carry that forward into this 20-lap race.
And his podium in that Superpole race, of course, now gives him a front row grid slot for race 2. The top 9 grid positions settled by the result earlier on today. It was Jonathan Rea who was victorious, with Toprak Razgatlioglu and Loris Baz 2nd and 3rd. Significant gaps between those 3 riders over the 10-lap distance, and we saw how Loris Baz struggled to stay with the pace in the second half of the action here in race number 1, so we'll see what he can do in race 2 from the front row. Alex Lowe, Scott Redding and Tom Sykes from row 2. Redding certainly with work to do. He's the current championship leader, but his margin after finishing down the order first time out today has been slashed to just a single point. Then it's Michael Vandermark, Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Leon Haslam who round out the top 9. The rest of the field, all their positions determined by their performance in the Tissot Superpole session itself here yesterday. Problems for Chaz Davies earlier on, failing to score. He is going to be among the riders fighting his way through the field. He will line up from 13th position. So Steve, the likes of Davies with work to do, but up at the front of the field, we'd expect a very different race here in race 2 compared to the 10-lap Superpole race, where of course the riders have settled their positions on the grid for this one.
I'm really interested to see if we're going to see something different from Scott Redding in this race, because obviously in race 1 and the Superpole race, he was further down the order than he would have expected. Is he going to take a gamble on tyres in this race and maybe try and use that SCX tyre to generate a little bit more grip in the early stages of the race? Will he try and use that during this feature length race? That's going to be a big challenge for the Ducati rider if he does opt for that, but he has to try something different today.
He certainly struggled here in race 1, so if he repeats the same and expects a different result, they say that's the first sign of madness, don't they? So Scott Redding will be hoping to make a step forward.
Well, Scott Redding said after Jerez, he asked, like, why did Jonathan Rea change his tyre from race 1 to race 2? He was able to fight for the race win. Suddenly you change the tyre and it changes everything for the Sunday in Jerez for Jonathan Rea. Scott Redding's looking for something completely different yesterday, so maybe he opts to make that drastic change.
Scott Redding will be lining up from P5. We saw him him deep in conversation at the end of that Superpole race. He's not a man who wants to be finding himself out of the podium positions in 2020. He is determined to stake his claim for the title.
Yeah, for Scott Redding, he knows that this weekend is going to be a tougher weekend than what he had last weekend. At the end of the day in Jerez, he knew the track, he knew exactly what to expect, and he knew that he was going to be competitive. We're in Portimao, and it's Jonathan Rea territory.
Jonathan Rea territory, as we've said, and he's only been defeated once in several weekends around this circuit, and that was by the monster of the Ducati last season in the hands of Alvaro Bautista. But Ducati certainly struggling this weekend, and Rea has got to make hay while the sun shines. He'll be looking to become the championship leader again after this race.
Yeah, everything looking really good for Jonathan Rea this weekend. Possible exception of those sunglasses, but other than that, Johnny has looked on form. He's looked pretty much unbeatable as well. He's got great pace in the races. He was able to get himself back onto the kind of form that we've seen from Jonathan over the years, where he spends Friday just working on race tyres, working on tyre life, trying to make sure he understands exactly what to expect. He doesn't have to go out and really set that ultimate fast lap time. It was all about building himself up for these moments that matter. This is after yesterday's race, and obviously after the Superpole race, similar celebrations for Jonathan Rea. So he's been able to build up all the way through the weekend to exactly what he wants.
Boy, did he enjoy that race victory yesterday. It shows not only how much it meant to him, perhaps emotionally, but certainly in terms of the championship.
I think it was one of those occasions where you saw again from Jonathan Rea just how much he wants to keep winning. He's won 5 titles in a row. It's easy to rest on your laurels and think that's good enough, but for Jonathan Rea, it's never good enough. It's never enough wins.
Toprak Razgatlioglu, 2 retirements to his name this season. He's 17 points down on Scott Redding, and he could well have been our championship leader at this point just because of the sheer volume of podiums that he's been able to put in.
Well, Toprak's had 5 podiums, and he could easily have had 7 podiums because he's been strong all the way through the season. Everywhere we've gone, he's been able to be in that fight. It's only really been mechanical issues that have caused him any sort of trouble.
So Razgatlioglu, who was second in the Superpole race, he's got a bit of a step to find, though, if he wants to take the fight to Jonathan Rea, both over the 10-lap distance and based on what we saw in race 1 here yesterday.
Yeah, I think I did Toprak a disservice there. 6 podiums through the season so far, and he's just been really competitive. It's only those mechanical issues that have held him back.
Yes, so only in those 2 races where he had a retirement did he fail to make it onto the podium. And to be perfectly honest, he was in contention in those 2 races as well. As we catch up with Alex Lowes, 2 4th positions so far this weekend for Lowes. It's been a solid weekend, not the prolific scoring that we saw first time out in Phillip Island, but we saw what a great job he did in Jerez of gradually improving as the weekend went on. He could be in with a shout of a podium here.
I think it's easy to forget as well just how little experience he has on the Kawasaki, and then in particular here in Portimao. Everyone else really enjoyed a winter test to get themselves up to speed. Alex Lowes with a new bike arrived here in Portugal, having not spun a lap around this place, so they really did have to hit the ground running in a race weekend situation, and I think Kawasaki have done a really good job on that side of the pit box to have him as a competitive package. He's been able to put it on the front row in the Superpole session. You can see there Michael Ruben Rinaldi. He's trying to keep everyone up to date in the MotoGP race from Brno, and it looks like Brad Binder's not doing too badly out there.
You're watching the wrong stuff, Michael. What are you doing? Get back onto the WorldSBK video pass. Michael Ruben Rinaldi here in slow motion replay.
Yeah, slow motion replay, but that front fender is fairly moving around rapidly there on the Go 11 Ducati. But Rinaldi in the second half of these races, he's been rapid. He's been able to really make progress. He uses the tyre very well, and his biggest issue has been getting himself up to speed for the first 5-6 laps of races. But once we get past that point, as the tyre starts to drop for everyone else, that's when Rinaldi's really been coming into his own.
Yes, good vibrations for Michael Ruben Rinaldi, who will start from the 3rd row of the grid here. He was 5th in race 1 and had the pace of the front runners in the closing stages, so particularly in the second half of the race, he'll fancy his chances if he can stay towards the front of the field. Perhaps the opposite is true for Loris Baz, who admitted in the interview after taking 3rd position in the Superpole race that would be a difficult result to replicate over the longer 20-lap distance.
For Loris Baz, this weekend's important just because he's been able to get himself back onto the podium. The longer feature race yesterday was a struggle for him, but at least now he's got that monkey off his back. He's able to build on it, and we'll see if they're able to make some progress. Himself and his crew chief Mick Shanley really have been working well together.
And what about Tom Sykes on the BMW? He certainly impressed me this weekend because he was able to maintain some longevity during the race 1 performance and stay up towards the pack, as it were, eventually in 8th position, and always a good performer in the Superpole race, the shorter distance. Could he go a little bit longer this time around and stay up towards the front?
Well, Sykes is fighting for his future, same as his teammate Eugene Laverty, and for Tom Sykes, he's been able to do a better job this weekend than what Laverty's been able to do. So for Tom, he can have his confidence pretty high. He knows that in yesterday's race he was able to manage that tyre all the way through, so he'll certainly expect the same to be the case here in race 2.
Plenty of patter snacks on standby for Michael van der Mark, who will line up from row number 3 here, starting in 7th position. A little bit of a disappointment for van der Mark, particularly after he went so well in race 1.
Yeah, for van der Mark, he probably would have expected to have been a little bit closer to Baz in that podium scrap in the Superpole race, but for Michael, it's always a case of trying to build yourself up through the course of these feature-length races. That's whenever he really comes into his own, and he knows that he's going to need to make some progress from that 3rd row of the grid. He's alongside Rinaldi, and we know Rinaldi's going to be coming strong all the way through the race, so you've got to make sure you're in front of him in the early laps.
Plenty of riders, as I said, further down the order who will be in contention for points here, because unlike in the Superpole race, where it's only the top 9 who are rewarded, in the 20-lap feature races, it's the top 15 who score points. So plenty of scraps down the order, and plenty to fight for as well in the series standings. There's a bit of a gap behind the top 4 at the moment to the likes of Michael van der Mark and Chaz Davies, who've been somewhat less consistent, but our top 4 all still pretty closely packed together in the early running of this season.
Yeah, 21 points separating them after 8 races, and that's no flash in the pan. We've been able to see that WorldSBK all the way through this season so far. Every race has had good battles. Jonathan Ray might have been able to run away at the front of the field yesterday, but you still saw that on your off day for Scott Redding, you can finish further down the field than probably would have been the case a couple of years ago. It was the same last weekend in Jerez for Jonathan Ray, where he came away with a 6th place finish in race 2, and it did show just how close it is getting in the field.
The likes of Marco Melandri, who we saw a couple of moments ago, is finding that out to his cost. He starts well down the field in 18th position, so it's been a very difficult weekend for Marco Melandri as he stepped in at late notice just a week ago for the opening European round of this 2020 campaign. Eugene Laverty there making his way out onto the circuit. Laverty will also start pretty well down the field compared perhaps to what we might have expected around a circuit that he knows and loves. And again, as you said, Steve, he knows he's got a direct head-to-head competition with Tom Sykes, so to be starting behind him on the grid, he knows he needs to fight his way forward.
Yeah, and I think Laverty's biggest problem this year is the fact that it just doesn't have the data, it doesn't have the information with that bike, because having missed so much of the winter test schedule with bad weather, and then suddenly you've got a 5-month gap, you're really behind the 8 ball whenever you try and get yourself up to speed with a new package. At least for Kawasaki, we talked about Alex Lowe's losing track time in the winter. At least with Kawasaki, they've got a bike that's very well established. They've got the crew that knows the bike really well. For BMW, you're in the 2nd year with that new bike, and also this year they made a big step forward in terms of their engine. So a lot of what they did last year may not be able to carry forward straight away, and that really has hampered Laverty.
And of course, Sykes has an advantage in real terms in that sense, with a year already under his belt.
A year already there, a year with the team, all those things make a big difference.
Tom Sykes then will be starting from P6. Here is the man that has been the focus of attentions this weekend. Scott Redding came into the weekend with a championship advantage. He still has one, but it's down now to just a single point for Scott Redding, who leads it on 112 points compared to 111 for Jonathan Ray. So there's absolutely nothing in it now at the top of the championship standings.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be exciting now. Only 1 point between Redding and Ray. Jonathan's been keen to point out that it's not Redding versus Ray or Ducati versus Kawasaki. You've got to look out for far more than just those 2 riders. You've got to look out for the Yamaha riders. You've got to look out for quite a few guys that can come in and really get themselves in and amongst the front runners.
As you can see along the bottom of your screen, we are without Sandro Cortese once again for race 2. Unfortunately, he was withdrawn after a crash here in the latter stages of race 1 yesterday. So he is declared unfit, will not be able to take the start, having been airlifted to hospital yesterday and undergone surgery on broken vertebrae. So everyone sends our best wishes to Sandro Cortese for a speedy recovery, and hopefully he can be back on the grid as soon as is realistically possible. Making our way through the field then from the back to the front, and once again it shows us how far there is to come for the likes of Chaz Davies down in 13th position.
Unfortunately for the likes of Chaz Davies, coming from the 5th row with the grid is going to be a big ask. That's why it was disappointing to see him crash out of the Superpole race, because it also took away any chance of him really being able to have a strong performance here in race 2. You could see down on the grid there as well, just the umbrellas being buffeted around, the wind's picking up again here in Portimao. In the afternoon it does tend to get a little bit windier here in the Algarve, but really does look like it's picked right up. That's going to be a big challenge for the riders, particularly up at places like turn 11 and turn 14.
Let's take a look at the grid then, starting with the top 9 whose positions were determined by their performance earlier on in the Super Pole race. It's Jonathan Rea who starts here from pole position. Alongside him, Toprak Razgatlioglu and Loris Baz. And once again, a record-breaking weekend for Jonathan Rea with a massive run of success around this circuit. And this will now be stacking up as his most successful circuit. 2 wins out of 2 so far this weekend.
Yeah, for Jonathan Rea, he's just been strong here in Portimao all the way through his career, all the way through this weekend. And it's very difficult to see who, over the course of 20 laps, is going to be able to beat Jonathan Rea, other than if Jonathan makes a mistake.
Alongside him on P2 will be Razgatlioglu, with Baz starting on P3 and Scott Redding starting from the middle of that second row. So his direct championship rival at present with work to do. And there's an opportunity for the likes of Toprak even to get in and amongst the mix at the top of the standings. Toprak starting from P2, that's where he's finished both races so far. And
it's where he's been all the way through this weekend, inside those leading positions. And once you looked into the race pace on Friday, you could see Jonathan Rea had that bit of an edge, but Toprak's been right thereabouts all the way through, so you'd expect him to be able to fight it out for another podium. He does look like he's got that little bit of an edge over everyone else, so they'll need to make a step forward.
Here is our current championship leader, Scott Redding, who'll be lining up on row 2. Either side of him, Alex Lowe's and Tom Sykes. So 3 different manufacturers on that second row of the grid. For Scott Redding, this is a moment of intense focus for him, because he knows he's got to pull something out of the hat here, the rabbit out of the hat metaphorically, to try and defend that championship lead.
Yeah, and like I said, are we going to see a change in rear tyre for Scott Redding to try something different during this race? Will he take the gamble on the SCX tyre?
Jonathan Rea then receiving yet another watch, and he must have quite the collection by now for his victory in the Super Pole race. 2 wins out of 2, as we've said, here this weekend, and he will start as the favourite undeniably from pole position. But we could see a really interesting battle potentially developing behind him. Loris Baz here starting from 3rd position is going to have his work cut out to defend that place. He was only 6th in the full length race 1.
Yeah, I think Monique's got her work cut out to try and keep the shade on Loris Baz there on the grid. You can see that the wind's picked up, so the air temperature is going to come down a little bit, but the actual heat is still very hot out there for all these riders. That's why you're seeing all the bikes covered up to try and take as much heat away from the tank area as possible, where the rider's going to be hunched over.
Second row of the grid, as we said, Alex Lowe, Scott Redding and Tom Sykes. Here is Lowe's, 4th on the grid, 2 4th places to his name so far this weekend. Getting onto the podium would be a good end to the weekend for him.
Yeah, and for Lowe's, it's just been another consistent weekend. Exactly what you want to see from the Kawasaki rider, and you know, it's what this team's lacked over the last few years, to be able to have someone that's just been able to grind out those consistent results. Obviously with Tom Sykes, they were able to do that for a long time, and it's kept Jonathan Rea on his toes. It's been able to keep Kawasaki moving forward. That's exactly what you want to do.
Completing row 2, it's Tom Sykes. As we've been saying, the BMW has tended to struggle in terms of tyre life and in terms of the second half of races, and Tom Sykes did finish down in 8th position in race 1, but showed more signs of being able to stay with the group.
Yeah, the BMW made a big step forward at the Catalan test with the electronics package to try and manage that tyre life. And it seems like they've really been able to make a step forward, because Tom Sykes in race 1, his pace at the end of the race was very impressive.
Row 3, Michael van der Mark, Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Leon Haslam. Here is Rinaldi, who starts from P8 and 5th position in race 1. He could be one to watch in the latter stages of race 2.
Yeah, the big thing for Rinaldi is just to be able to make a decent start, see if he's able to run in that front group, and then as the race progresses, he's got that pace to be able to use that tyre really well.
On the outside of him here, it's Michael van der Mark, 3rd in race 1. He's down in 7th on the grid, though, here, as a result of finishing in 7th place in the Super Pole race. He looked strong in race 1, but earlier on today couldn't quite replicate that pace.
Yeah, just needs to make a step in the feature race compared to yesterday. But if you think back to yesterday's race, there was a false neutral that dropped him down the order. He suddenly had to spend a few laps trying to recover positions. Once he was through on the rest of that group, he was then able to match the pace of Toprak and actually close in on him in those closing laps. So for van der Mark, he'll certainly think that if he can make a good start, he's got half a chance.
Completing row 3, it's Leon Haslam, 12th place in race 1, up into 9th in the Super Pole race, and what a critical 9th position that always is over the 10-lap distance, because it gets him up onto the 3rd row of the grid, and he's right in the mix at the start.
He's in the mix at the start, but unless that Honda's made a step forward in the hot conditions, Haslam's going to struggle during the course of this race.
On to the 4th row of the grid then, Eugene Laverty, Garrett Kurloff and Alvaro Bautista, and a message there for Sandro Cortese, who we do, as I say, wish a speedy recovery. Garrett Gerloff will be lining up from P11 here. Looked good in the Super Pole race, actually wasn't far off ending up on the third row of the grid. It was a very close finale, and Gerloff just held back in 10th position.
Of course, Sandro Cortese, former rider for that GRT team, so nice to see the team giving him a bit of support, and obviously everyone thinking the same for Sandro. But for Garrett Gerloff, it's been a really good start to his World SBK career. We saw him with top 10 finishes last time out in Jerez. We've seen him in the battle as well this weekend, so for Garrett Gerloff, he's been able to make good progress.
Eugene Laverty was in the battle last time out as well, or possibly in the wars, having gone down with Chaz Davies. 10th place, though, in race 1, so he does have points on the board this weekend.
Yeah, and he's going to have to soldier on during this race from 10th on the grid. But for Eugene, it really is a case of now or never. He needs to make that step forward. He needs to get a good result in this race.
By the end of the 10-lap distance in the Super Pole race, Alvaro Bautista was right with Haslam as well as Gerloff. The challenge for Alvaro Bautista will be to hit the ground running in this one. Of course, successful here last season. A very different project for him on board the Honda.
Yeah, and for Alvaro Bautista, we've been able to see that during the course of races, he's been able to really close that gap to Leon Haslam, because in testing and in practice sessions, we've seen Haslam over a single lap generally being able to be a little bit faster than Alvaro Bautista. But the points aren't rewarded for what you do over a single lap. They're rewarded for what you do over the likes of these 20-lap races.
We've tended to see with those Hondas that when one is going well, the other is struggling.
Yeah, and that's been the unfortunate reality. It's been a tale of two halves, really, because when it's been cool, Haslam's been good. When it's been hot, Bautista's been good, and never the two have been fast at the same time, really. But you'd expect that to change as Honda get more and more accustomed to the bike.
I suspect that the twain shall meet at some stage during this race number 2, potentially with Bautista attempting to move forward. Row number 5, Chaz Davies, Xavi Forés and Federico Caricasulo. Davies, after that retirement last time out, he spoke in at the end of race 1 about having had some difficulties with the electronics that kept him out from the leading group, so he will be optimistic of moving forward here from P13. Alongside him, Xavi Forés, 2 13th places to his name. That, to be perfectly honest, is about where he's been so far this weekend. And Federico Caricasulo completes that 5th ride.
Yeah, and for Xavi Forés, it really is a case trying to just get yourself up to speed with the Kawasaki. We know what Forés can do when the bike's good underneath him, but the Kawasaki, a very different beast to what he's ridden in the past in World SBK.
Just going back to Davies, that's a fair reflection of the fact that the Ducatis have struggled in general this weekend.
I think it's a reflection on just how pernickety that bike is. If it's in the right operating window, it's almost unbeatable. If it's outside of that, it's very difficult to ride. It's a real double-edged sword of what you get with the Ducati V4R. When it's working unbelievably. When it's not, it's a little bit difficult for the riders to get anything from it.
So get well soon, Sandro Cortese, as the riders through the field echo those sentiments after Cortese's frightful crash late on here yesterday. As for Federico Caricasulo, 15th in race 1, snagged a point there, improved in the Super Pole race, but it's the long game now for Federico Caricasulo.
Yeah, for Caricasulo there from 15th on the grid, the goal just has to be try and pick up some points.
Discussions going on before we get underway with this one. Looking down to the 6th row of the grid, we'll have Maximilian Scheib, Tati Mercado and Marco Melandri. Melandri, you would say normally out of position in 18th place, but frankly, that's where he's been.
Yeah, for Melandri in the Jerez races, he came through the field, but I think that's your biggest indication of the advantage that the Ducati had in Jerez in terms of being able to manage that tyre in the heat, because other than that, we haven't really seen anything from Melandri yet on his return to World SBK, and it's obviously a very big challenge. You jump back in to the middle of a season, you haven't ridden the bikes for 9 months, you haven't trained to be a World SBK racer for those 9 months, so you know, it's not to underestimate the challenge facing Melandri, but I think he would have expected, after what he did in race 1 in Jerez, to be able to kick forward from that. 38
years of age as well, so adapting to a new machine at this stage of any rider's career is always going to be a challenge. Tati Mercado there lining up from P17. He's the most experienced rider on this grid, yet to have secured a podium, but he hasn't been anything like a front runner so far in 2020. 16th place and 14th so far this weekend. 17th and 15th for Marco Melandri. Did get into difficulties in the Super Pole race, but ended up well adrift of the rest of the group. And as you can see, this will be his 195th World Superbike start. So he's certainly a man of plenty of experience to be able to grind out a result. But finding himself that far down the order, I think, will have been a surprise even to him.
Yeah, I think so. But like we said, it's a case of having to adapt to it, try and see if you're able to make some progress from that from the 6th row start.
Row number 7 features Sylvain Barrier, this man here with 18th and 16th so far. Takumi Takahashi and Christophe Pensant with Lorenzo Gabellini rounding out our 22. Of course, without Sandro Cortese, we're down one rider from 23 to 22 starters for this 20-lap race. The race number 2 here from Portimao, just 5 minutes away, or just under 5 minutes away now, as the safety car moves away from the grid. What can we expect to see? Well, as for the front of the field, the championship battle might be set up at the moment as Redding versus Ray, but the race battle looks set to be Ray versus Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, and it's a question of if anyone else is able to get close to them, and really for Toprak, it's also a question as to whether or not he can get close to Jonathan Ray, because Ray does have that clear advantage here this weekend.
Could we be looking at another scrap for third place then?
I think we're looking at a maybe someone can go with Toprak, but realistically it does look like Toprak and Ray just have that little bit of an edge.
Just going back to the lower order of the grid, catch up with our final 3 runners in this lineup. Takumi Takahashi really struggling on the Honda. If you thought Haslam and Bautista were struggling on the Honda this season, then Takahashi rooted down in 19th position in both appearances this weekend, so he's certainly got some work to do to find some extra pace. Christophe Pensant, who will be starting from 21st position, retired from race 1, 17th, beat Takahashi earlier on here today. Frankly, the group of 4 riders at the back of this field have been squabbling amongst themselves this weekend. Barrier, Takahashi, Pensant and Gabellini. Yeah,
and for Gabellini, we can see here the teammate of Takahashi, they're running a very different spec of bike to what we see from the full HRC squad of Haslam and Bautista. The Marawaki team going down their own path with developing that bike.
Building up then to race number 2 here in Portimao, the last of 3 races this weekend in the World Superbike class. Jonathan Ray has made it 2 out of 2 so far. Can anyone take the fight to the front? Razgatlioglu, the protege, starts alongside him, and championship leader Scott Redding lines up on the second row of the grid from P5. Lowe's and Sykes alongside him, and plenty of different manufacturers in the top positions again. Advantage Kawasaki, advantage Jonathan Ray. The story of Saturday in Portimao has been the story of Sunday so far as well. A familiar tale, of course. Ray has been the unstoppable force around this venue for the last half a dozen years at least. But Scott Redding is 2020's immovable object, and the two will clash again here in race 2. The crew in blue have also been a force this weekend. 3 Yamahas at the front of the field throughout. Throw all of that into the mix, and this should be another cracker. Steve English alongside me for race 2. It's a Ray show at the front. Can anyone live with his pace here?
No, unfortunately not. So far this weekend, we've been able to see Jonathan Ray really set the pace here in Portimao. He's been able to do that in race 1. He's been able to do it in the Superpole race. And unless someone makes a massive step forward, they're not really going to be able to put pressure on Jonathan Ray. The only thing that's going to stop Jonathan Ray is Jonathan Ray. But the good thing about that is, behind Jonathan, we've got a really close field, especially in those battles for the podiums. The likes of the Yamahas, Toprak, Michael van der Mark and Lawrence Bass have all been closely matched, so we should have a really good scrap behind this man, Jonathan Ray.
The fact that Ray's starts have been generally excellent also plays into his favour, because it puts him just a little bit too far out of reach for Toprak to try and startle him on the opening lap.
Jonathan Ray does nothing badly anymore. He's a very good qualifier. He's good off the starts. He's very adaptable during the races. He understands the bike. So whenever you take him to a track where he's had such success, where he's been able to win so many races, he arrives here with confidence. He arrives here with all of the data about what he needs to do this weekend, and that's what gives him the edge. But for the rest of the field, they're close enough where if Jonathan makes a mistake, they might be able to keep with him, keep him under pressure. But the biggest issue for all the riders today is actually going to be that wind. We saw on the grid all of the umbrellas getting moved around. That's going to be an issue as you crest this hill over James's Leap. When you come into turns 11 and 12, that's going to be an issue. And then up at the top of the hill at turn 14. So that can be a factor. But for these superbike riders, you have to think that it really is a case of everyone has to maximise what they have underneath them, make a good start, and see if you're able to get in and amongst it.
What can Scott Redding do then to try and maintain his championship advantage, leaving Portimao? Is it just a question of damage limitation again? That's been the story so far this weekend.
It is a question of damage limitation. That's why I'm interested to see what happens when we get the Pirelli tyre sheet, to see whether or not Scott Redding's going to try something different, because what he's been doing so far this weekend hasn't worked. It's worth taking a gamble to see if he's able to make that step up from being in the battle for 5th, 6th, 7th position to suddenly being able to be in a podium shot.
Watching on board here with Michael van der Mark, and certainly van der Mark going from a little bit further down the order than he might have hoped.
Yeah, for van der Mark, he's been good throughout the course this weekend. He just needs to make that step. His pace in the second half of yesterday's race was very impressive. You can see there in the right boot, he's still got that foot-operated rear brake, but for Michael van der Mark, he really does use that scooter-style rear brake with the lever on the handlebar. That's what gives him a little bit of an advantage. He was one of the first riders to adapt to that. Jonathan Rea, we can see here, he's also adapted to that for the 2020 season.
Jonathan Rea is your pole sitter after victory in the Super Pole race earlier on here today, and few would bet against him taking a championship lead to Aragon. That might be necessary. The Ducatis are expected to shine there. Scott Redding, though, is the top performing Ducati on the grid here, lining up in P5. He's got work to do. Race 2 from Portimao, the Algarve International Circuit. Lights out, better start this time from Razgatlioglu, side by side with Jonathan Rea in the run to turn 1. Will Rea have enough to claim the whole shot once again? Baz sending it down the inside. It's going to be tight, but Rea just about gets across the front of Razgatlioglu. Baz is away well, as is Scott Redding, up already into 4th position, so Alex Loos is relegated backwards down the order, and Michael van der Mark has sent it down the inside of Alex Loos as well. Redding already up into 3rd place. He's gone aggressive on this opening lap. It's Rea, Razgatlioglu, and Redding from Baz pushed down to 4th. Loos trying to respond down the inside for 5th position on Michael van der Mark. He gets there. Van der Mark will try to chop back through, and down goes Eugene Laverty. Disaster for Laverty in the early stages. He shakes his hands in frustration as the bike lands in the gravel trap.
Yeah, unfortunately for Laverty, he hasn't gotten too far in either race today, and that's down to turn 5. Very easy for it to happen. There's bumps all the way through there, and that's why, particularly on the first lap when you're jostling for position, it's easy to have that incident.
Real disappointment for Eugene Laverty. He'd managed to find his way past teammate Sykes amongst others and up into 7th place, but he goes down at turn 5. It's a tricky turn as we watch the fight for 2nd position here. Redding is clawing all over the tail of Razgatlioglu. He's already made his way up from 5th position to 3rd. He's not going to give up this championship lead without a fight. Rea, Razgatlioglu, Redding, Baz in 4th position, and then there's a little bit of a gap emerging now to Alex Loos in 5th, who has managed to defend and attack at the same time against Michael van der Mark. Those two swapping and changing for places. Haslam up to 7th, with Davies already making progress into 8th. That's a good start from Chad Davies as well, as we ride on board with Scott Redding.
Yeah, Davis made a step forward in the warm-up, and then obviously it's Baz at the last corner.
A big off, that's going to be at high speed for Loris Baz.
Yeah, for Loris Baz, that's a 4th gear corner. Very easy to have a big slide through there, and unfortunately for Baz, out of the race. You can see for Scott Redding able to use the top speed of that Ducati V4R to make the move quite easily on top rack.
Battle behind as well. Van der Mark has recovered ahead of Alex Loos, so the field really shaken up over the last couple of corners there. It's Rea now from Redding. The top 2 in the championship are in the top 2 positions. If things were to stay as they are at present, Jonathan Rea would take a 4-point championship lead. A long way to go yet.
Yeah, got the tyre sheet from Pirelli, and Scott Redding hasn't tried something different for this race, so this is a sign of clear progress that they've made with that Ducati over the course of this morning. So good stuff from Redding to be able to get himself up there, but you can see how hard he's having to push to try and get that bike stopped on the running turn 5. That's going to give top rack Razgatlioglu a lot of confidence. So
Razgatlioglu attempting to haul in now Scott Redding, who has lost ground further down the order. Loos has recovered against Michael van der Mark, so good fight going on there for what is now 4th position. Alex Loos is back up into P4 with van der Mark relegated down to 5th place. The two of them swapping and changing, though, is not doing them any favours. They've dropped half a second back from Razgatlioglu in 3rd place. We have 3 different manufacturers in the top 3 positions again.
Yeah, and this is what you want to see at the front of the field. You can see with Jonathan Rea, Scott Redding and top rack Razgatlioglu, very different styles out there, and both of them trying to make sure that they're able to give themselves half a chance here in these early stages of the race. Scott Redding doing very well to have made this step forward compared to where he was yesterday and over the course of the rest of the weekend. Let's see if he's able to maintain this all the way through.
Leon Haslam, an excellent start from 9th, is up into P6. That's brilliant running from him. He is coming under pressure from Chaz Davies, so it looks immediately as though Davies has made a step forward compared to what we saw from him in race number 1. Davies up to 7th. Rinaldi obviously has gained a place from the incident for Loris Baz to move into 8th. Forres and Sykes rounding out the top 10. Problems for Maximilian Schein in the penultimate sector of the lap. He has gone down, and that will rule him out of proceedings. He was outside of the points-paying positions anyway. Certainly inside the points-paying position, Jonathan Rea, who leads the way. Scott Redding doing a remarkable job so far to stay right with it.
Yeah, and let's see if Redding's able to hold on to this kind of pace. Impressive climb to have made this step forward. Jonathan Rea with the fastest lap last time around into the 1 minute 42s. So we know from yesterday that Jonathan's able to find a little bit more pace than that. But Scott Redding, he's made a big step forward. But it's into turn 5. This is where we've seen him really struggle a few times to get the bike stopped. And he's just going to try and hook up a really late able to stretch out a little bit of a lead there with the top rack Razgatlioglu. The gap up to half a second.
Yes, so Razgatlioglu dropping back slightly in third position. It's Ray from Reading from Razgatlioglu from Lowe's, who's still within a second of the riders directly in front of him. Then it's Michael van der Mark, non-fire adrift. Leon Haslam is dropping back, and that's going to hold back Chaz Davies unless he can get swiftly through. Davies slow in the first sector of this latest lap, and it's dropped him back from Haslam, and that's where the fight is in terms of immediate position change opportunities. It looks as though Davies is much faster than Haslam as things stand.
Yeah, at the front of the field, Jonathan Ray, you can see their fastest lap last time around. Sector 1 he's gone red, Sector 2 he's gone red on this lap, Sector 3 he's just about to come through to the end of. So Jonathan Ray is starting to put the hammer down. He wants to try and break away from Scott Redding. He wants to make sure he's able to open up this gap. As it is right now in this lap, he's been able to pull out half a second.
Lap 3, and Jonathan Ray is starting to make the break. Scott Redding drops more than a half a second on this lap so far. Razgatlioglu still in third place, still only 7/10 of a second covering the top 3. Let's take another look at the start here.
Yeah, and you can see with Toprak there in the 54 and Scott Redding on the 45. Look at how Redding's able to come through from that second row of the grid. But Loris Baz was very quick off the line, and he tried to put himself in and amongst it. But very easy for the riders to trip over one another on that run through turn 1. So they all did quite well to be able to get through there.
Looked like a pretty cautious effort from Razgatlioglu in particular on turn 1. He knew Jonathan Ray was going to try and come across the front of him.
Yeah, that's the big thing, because where Jonathan had pushed himself out there, he was always going to be in a position to try and just release that brake and come across the front of the track, take his line and determine everything for everyone else.
So we're going to watch now the incident for Loris Baz at the final turn.
Yeah, Loris actually, he's lucky enough that it was a crash like that, because if it's a little bit later in the corner, you're really on the gas. You're coming third, fourth gear through there, and you pick up speed very quickly. Loris, you can see there, he grabbed his leg, but hopefully he's not too badly injured after that. It's just a case of having rolled through the gravel trap.
He was very aggressive on the opening lap of the Super Pole race, and he certainly went like the clappers at the start of race 2 as well, and perhaps that's what's caught him out.
Yeah, a little bit too aggressive for some of the riders out there in the opening race of the day, but Loris did what he had to do, and he was able to come away with a podium. Scott Redding, though, you could see in that run through turn 10 and 11, just having a bit of a slide through there. He's losing time now because Toprak's closing right up on him.
Well, Razgatlioglu with the gap now down to just over 3/10 of a second. Second and third place, we could see a fight here, and Alex Lowe's is coming with Razgatlioglu as well. We've got 4 riders in the mix. Redding looked a little bit out of shape there actually, and Razgatlioglu still gaining ground, still gaining momentum. See if he can make a manoeuvre. I don't think he's going to be close enough this time around as they come down the start-finish straight once again. Jonathan Ray is powering clear up front. Forget about him already. He's starting to look the dominant force in this one. The gap up to over a second. Van der Mark tagged to the back of Lowe's here. Has an opportunity perhaps into turn number 1, not quite close enough, but from second all the way down to 5th, little to separate this quartet.
Yeah, and for Scott Redding actually did quite a good job on that lap to be able to dig in the second half of it, to be able to keep that gap as it is to Toprak. But we've been able to see that all 4 of these riders have good pace. They've all been good and consistent. Look at the tyre sheet from Pirelli again. Alex Lowe's using that SCX rear tyre, so for some that could be a bit of a gamble, but considering what he did last week and in yesterday's race on that tyre, you'd imagine that that's a good decision by Kawasaki and Alex Lowe's to be able to give them the tyre that they want through the course of this race.
Look behind, the 4 riders packed closely together from 6th position back at the moment. Haslam is bottlenecking them all up with Chaz Davies directly behind. Then it's Rinaldi and Xavi Forres. If he were to stay where he is, this would be a season's best performance from Forres on the number 12 Kawasaki. Haslam holding back Davies. Davies needs to find his way through as swiftly as possible here.
Haslam, another rider that's opted for the SCX rear tyre, so he clearly wants the grip that's on offer from that. As the track temperature comes up, as the heat comes up, it gets harder and harder for the Honda rider, so he's just opting to make sure he has as much grip as possible at the early stages of this race. It'll be interesting to see how he manages that pace through 20 laps.
Davies looked almost though he was tripping over Leon Haslam there. He's got to be careful because Rinaldi is right on his tail.
The pace from these guys isn't too bad. It's about a second slower than Jonathan Ray, but it's not awful at this early stage. But for Chaz Davies, he's clearly been bottled up and wanted to try and make that move. Nice clean move there from Chaz Davies, and definitely with that SCX rear tyre, it's going to be tough for Haslam to manage that all the way through.
So Chaz Davies fights his way through to the front of that secondary group, but he's got 2.5 seconds to cover to Michael van der Mark ahead if he wants to challenge for a podium place. Haslam in the slipstream with the power of the Honda. 3 riders are going to fight it out now down into turn number 1 over this 6th position. Haslam attempts to respond. Davies is good enough though into turn 1, and he's pulled a little bit of a margin over Leon Haslam as well. A margin of comfort, we might suggest. It's Michael Ruben Rinaldi who's next to have a pop at Haslam, and Xavi Forres Sykes is still right in the mix as well.
We're just looking further down the times. Tom Sykes is only lapping 1/10 of a second slower than Jonathan Ray at the front of the field, so that's impressive stuff from him.
Problems for, we're going to see the replay here.
Yeah, for Alex Lowes and Michael Van der Mark. Van der Mark able to get himself down the inside. These two, of course, while used to battling with one another when they were Yamaha teammates, but very different bikes now between the two former teammates. But Van der Mark able to make a nice clean move in the run into turn 1.
Yes, so Michael Van der Mark and Alex Lowes scrapping it out. They need to stick with Razgatlioglu here and hope that he can make ground on Scott Redding and that the three of them can move forward to fight for that second place, because Ray is checking out. He's managing his gap of a second at the front.
The good thing for Van der Mark and for Lowes is typically whenever they've battled in the past, they haven't cost each other too much time. They make clean moves on each other, and it tends not to be where you're suddenly diving down the inside, standing up the other rider, costing each other time. So that's why they've been able to make that move for Van der Mark, and he's right there with Toprak.
Further back, Rinaldi is now all over the tailpipe of Leon Haslam, fighting over 7th position. So Xavi Fora is almost tripping over Rinaldi at one stage on this lap. Very close back from Chaz Davies, who sits in 6th place, not really making any massive gains on the route directly in front of him. So as you say, Steve, with Lowes and Van der Mark not exactly taking chunks out of one another, it is going to be difficult for Davies, but we saw how strong he was in the second half of race 1, and he will be hoping to make up ground.
Yeah, you can see there for Alex Lowes, he's getting the old bull message again. He got that in Phillip Island, so it's all about trying to be patient and try and manage this race. The reason that the team are saying that to him is that the pace is slower than you would have expected at this stage of the race, certainly slower compared to yesterday's race, so the track temperature is a little bit higher, and it's just going to make it harder and harder for the riders out there. So for Kawasaki, they're trying to tell Alex Lowes, make sure you manage your pace, because the race is going to come back to you.
Van der Mark looking racy at this stage, 1.5 tenths of a second faster than Razgatlioglu last lap around, and that's why he is now all over the back of him as they come around turn 5, and down goes Razgatlioglu. Toprak falls from 3rd position. Disaster for the Turkish rider. He rushes over to his machine. Frustration in the Pata Yamaha garage because Razgatlioglu has binned it from a podium place.
And I was going to say that Toprak's pace in this race just hasn't been what we've seen from him, so he clearly just didn't have the grip underneath him. That's why he hasn't been able to close up on Scott Redding, but you can see just that back end sliding on the entry down into 5. He's offline, he's in the wrong place through there, and even Toprak, with all of his reactions, just couldn't get that bike back into the right spot. And unfortunately for Toprak, that's the first time we've seen a mistake from him this season, and it's a costly one because it's out of the podium.
Remember that with 2 retirements already this season, he has got ground to make up in the series standings. He's remounted, he's inside the points, but it's all the way down in 14th. Could be in for an entertaining finale to this one, with Razgatlioglu gradually fighting his way through.
Yeah, Toprak's done a pretty good job actually not to lose too much time, because the crash seems like it's cost him about 13 or 14 seconds. So he's been able to get himself ran over, got that bike picked up, and got himself going. It wasn't as costly as it could have been.
Well, we saw in the Supersport race yesterday, Jules Cluzel managing to make up time and not lose too much time by going down there at turn 5 and eventually coming home in 6th. That really would be some achievement for Razgatlioglu, though, in this company. It's Ray who leads the way ahead of Redding. Redding coming back with a good first sector, still only a second the gap between the two of them. Van der Mark is the man now with a bit of clear air in front of him, who fancies pushing his way towards second place.
Yeah, Van der Mark lost time in that last lap with Toprak's crash in front of him, but he's been able to set very good, consistent pace over the last few laps. Last time around was still pretty much bang on the same pace as Scott Redding, and for Michael Van der Mark, certainly looks like he's got a good bike underneath him to be able to start pushing forward. You could see a few slides from Van der Mark. He's clearly riding as hard as he can, try and close down Scott Redding in front of him.
Alex Lowes has dropped half a second or so over the last lap, so very much playing the long game, and problems.
Down at turn 5 for Alex Lowes as well.
So disaster around turn 5 for Alex Lowes. I was just talking about the fact that he was losing time, and now he's losing positions as well. Alex Lowes having gone down at turn 5.
Yeah, and you'd imagine a very similar crash. You can see his bikes ran on an awful lot further than Toprak's did, and for Lowes, his airbags come off, so clearly it's a little bit of a bigger impact than what we saw for Toprak, and looks like that's going to be his race done as well.
Oh, Alex Lowes, real frustration for him, because he was another one like Razgatlioglu who had ground to make up in the series standings, and with Ray and Redding leading at the moment, 1st and 2nd positions, this is going to open up a bit of a gap in terms of purely points and championship.
Yeah, and for all those riders trying to close up the ground. It really is a case of trying to avoid the mistakes. And unfortunately for Toprak and for Alex Lowe's on consecutive laps, both of them have had that instant down at turn 5.
So it's Ray from Reading from Van der Mark. 2.5 seconds covering the top 3. It's Van der Mark who's pursuing. Good fight still going on further back down the order. Davies has never shaken off the attentions of Leon Haslam, and Michael Ruben Rinaldi is still biding his time, waiting for an opportunity. Then it's Bautista, Sykes and Forres together in the race for 8th position, and Garrett Gerloff rounding out the top 10. Obviously, with 2 incidents, that presents a couple of opportunities to the likes of Haslam to potentially challenge for his best finish of the season.
Haslam doing a really good job to running inside the top 5 here. As we said earlier, he's got that SCX tyre on, so it's what he can do in the second half of the race to be able to keep that tyre life going.
And Xavi Forres challenging on the inside there of Tom Sykes as they went into turn 5. Couldn't quite make his way through. We're watching the fight for 5th position with Leon Haslam and Michael Ruben Rinaldi as Alex Lowe's makes his way into the pits following his dramas at turn 5.
That'll be disappointing for Lowe's, but now the attention shifts to what happens in this battle for 4th position. Chaz Davies trying to break away from Leon Haslam. He's done a good job in the last couple of corners to be able to stretch out a bit of a lead. So for Michael Ruben Rinaldi, it now becomes really important to be able to clear Haslam. Rinaldi's been able to be the top Ducati rider at times this weekend. Obviously Scott Redding's up there in 2nd spot, matching the pace of the race leader, Jonathan Ray. But for Michael Ruben Rinaldi, for Chaz Davies, very important to be able to beat each other in this race, because both of them are eyeing up that seat for next season.
All 3 of those Ducatis appear to have made a step forward here today, so obviously benefiting from the running through race 1.
I think as well as that the track temperatures increase. We've seen different crashes, whether it's Toprak or Lowe's from those leading positions. So clearly the grip has gone down as that temperature's gone up. The Ducati works that tyre so much better than the other bikes out there, so maybe that's what's making a big difference.
Watching Alvaro Bautista, who currently sits in a relatively isolated 7th place. He's a second down on Rinaldi, who sits in 6th position behind Bautista. Again, a couple of seconds back is Tom Sykes in 8th place. He has seen off the attentions, for the moment at least, of Xavi Forres. And then in the distance, Garrett Gerloff, who sits in 10th place, half a second over teammate Caricasulo. So that's going to be his fight. As for the front of the field, almost 3 seconds covering Ray and Van der Mark, but the gaps are fairly stable, Steve, it must be said.
Yeah, everyone's been able to manage their pace. The pace a little bit slower than what we saw yesterday, so everyone's just trying to make sure they're able to run a consistent pace at the front of the field. And right now, there's a 1.5 seconds between Ray and Redding. There's a 1.5 seconds between Redding and Van der Mark, and then there's a big gap back to Chaz Davies in 4th position.
Feeling a great deal of sympathy at the moment for both riders who've gone down there at turn 5, but particularly for Alex Lowe's, of course, after his retirement from the race.
Yeah, and for Lowe's and Razgadi, they certainly feel that there's an opportunity that went missing for both of them. But we saw that Toprak was struggling a little bit for grip. We saw Lowe's pace falling off a little bit in the early stages there as well. So maybe for both those riders, just suffering a little bit in the hot conditions here for race 2.
Well, Razgadioglu is faster than the riders in front of him, all the way up to 8th position. He's on the tail now of Tati Mercado for 12th position. So we are going to see Toprak, by the looks of things, start to move his way gradually up the order. At the moment, he's in unlucky 13th, and he's certainly going to be feeling unlucky after going down at turn 5. We pick them up now. Mercado defending position. Again, this should be a matter of time, because Razgadioglu clearly is out of position down in 13th. And meanwhile, further down the order, Eugene Lauti has also made up a position, picking off Lorenzo Gavellini. So if he can continue to make progress, he might be able to think about at least picking up a single point. Aspirations will be slightly higher for Razgadioglu. We ride on board with him. He's got the speed of the Yamaha coming off the final turn. He's right on the tail of Tati Mercado. Look how close the two of them were. Mercado's speed coming off that final turn. And down the start-finish straight is quite incredible. Razgadioglu always late in the race, though, into turn number 1, and makes that move look fairly straightforward. Gets it stopped in time as well, but that was very impressive speed coming off the final turn from the Ducati.
Yeah, the Ducati's just got a great engine underneath it. We see it time and time again, but for Toprak, he's been able to make the move on the brakes into turn 1. You'd expect Toprak to be able to do that even coming back after the crash. You know that he's going to be committed on the brake point, but good move by Toprak. Now the big question is, how many points can Toprak get? Can he break into the top 10? He needs to find around about 6 seconds to catch up to Garrett Gerloff and Caricasulo in front of him.
Well, that's not going to be easy on the evidence of what we've seen in recent laps. He's been something like half a second faster than Gerloff and Carapasulo for the last lap or so around. Didn't make up a lot of ground on them on that previous lap as we return to the fight for 4th, 5th and 6th position. Davies, Haslam and Rinaldi, they're still in the same order, and Bautista's come back at them a little bit as well. He's got the gap down to below a second to Rinaldi in front of him.
Yeah, last time around he pulled in another couple of tenths of a second on Haslam and Rinaldi, but this is good performance from Leon Haslam on the 91 Honda. He's keeping that watching brief with Chaz Davis, he's keeping under pressure, and most importantly he's keeping Rinaldi at bay, so that's good stuff in the opening half of this race for Haslam. Let's see if he's able to really keep that going into the next 10 laps.
And Davies, now having got to the front of that group, is running the leader's pace. So again, as we saw at the end of race number 1, Davies is able to match the leaders. The problem for him is that he's coming from a way back as well. A look at what the championship would be if things were to stay as they are. As I said previously, Scott Redding up in second place would only lose 5 points here to Jonathan Rea. He's 1 in front at the moment, so although he'd leave Portimao second in the standings, he'd only be 4 points back. This is good damage limitation from Redding, and that was the mission here.
Yeah, and I think whenever you look at the championship as a whole, right now you would have to think it is Redding versus Rea, just because that mistake for Toprak, a couple of mechanical problems that he's had, that makes it very difficult in such a shortened season to try and catch that up. But speaking of catching up, look at Michael van der Mark. Last time around he pulled in half a second on Scott Redding, and on this lap so far he's been able to pull back another couple of tenths of a second. So Michael van der Mark on the number 60 Yamaha really is starting to close in.
We should have a race for second on our hands. Michael van der Mark, who finished on the podium in race 1, is again able to perform in the marathon, not in the sprint. He was down in 7th on the grid here after his performance in the Superpole race earlier on today, but it's Michael van der Mark who is on the chart. Oh, please for Leon Haslam. He's gone down at turn 5, yet another victim of that bumpy turn 5.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear that for all these riders, turn 5 is just on a complete knife edge today, and for Haslam, that's so unfortunate because he's done a good job to be able to run up there inside the top 5. He's lost it a little bit earlier than what we saw from Toprak, and looking at how his bike's gone through to there, I'd say that could be a little bit more similar to what happened to Lowe's than it was for Toprak. Into the braking area, you can see for Haslam just trying to be as aggressive as he can, and then the front just goes as you come through that track join. And yeah, for Leon, you can see he just puts his hands in the air. It's unfortunate, but at least for Haslam, this is a real sign of the progress they're making. Michael van der Mark, though, making a lot of progress to close up on Scott Redding.
Just 4 tenths of a second between Redding and van der Mark as they come back into turn number 1 on lap 13 of 20 here in Portimao. It's Jonathan Rea who leads it by 2.5 seconds. He is away and gone. The fights are further back down the order. Firstly, this one for second, and then a separate struggle for 5th place now with Leon Haslam out of the running, and Alvaro Bautista really challenging Michael Ruben Rinaldi, so it could be a decent day for Honda after all, but not for Leon Haslam. It's going to be Bautista instead who's set to benefit. It's Redding here holding second place, but Michael van der Mark has been making steady progress.
Yeah, for van der Mark, we've seen lap after lap he's been able to pull back a couple of tenths of a second here, tenths of a second there, but we know he's going to have to make the move early in the lap because he needs to give himself enough margin over that Ducati down that start-finish straight. We saw whenever we rode on board with Toprak just how fast Taddy Mercado's Ducati was, and Scott Redding's even faster than that.
Bautista has now passed Rinaldi, so Alvaro Bautista gaining a couple of places, first because of a fall for his teammate Leon Haslam, and then by picking off Michael Ruben Rinaldi. This is a decent performance from Bautista, and you know what? He might even be able to challenge Chaz Davies in the closing stages of this race and give Honda their best performance of this season so far. We're watching the battle between Redding and van der Mark, and it's certainly Michael van der Mark who is set to produce the fireworks over the next couple of laps.
Yeah, what we're seeing isn't van der Mark picking up his pace and closing up on Scott Redding. It's Scott Redding losing pace at this stage of the race. Scott Redding, obviously we saw all the way through this weekend, he's had a little bit of a struggle, and he's just losing a little bit of pace now at this stage, but van der Mark closing up on him, and you'd certainly think van der Mark's got that little bit more grip that should be able to make the move. Last time around though, the pace for Scott Redding lost half a second compared to Jonathan Rea.
And on the previous lap number 12, Alvaro Bautista was the fastest man of the lot. Bautista had been faster even than Rea, and again on lap number 13. So Alvaro Bautista fancies a sniff of some action late on in this race. It might take Redding and van der Mark coming together for him to get a podium, but at very least Bautista is hoping in on Chaz Davies. This is the fight for second. Redding versus van der Mark, and Michael van der Mark now within 2 tenths of a second as we come into the danger zone of turn 5, and Redding once again is wide there. Van der Mark cuts through. Get out of the way, I'm coming through, says the Flying Dutchman to claim second place.
Yeah, Van der Mark just clearly thinking, you know what, I'm just going to take mine over the line. You've made the mistake, and I want to make sure that I don't lose any speed by trying to make this move. As it stands right now, the gap between Van der Mark and Jonathan Rea was 3.1 seconds, so obviously too much time to make up there for Van der Mark, but as long as he's able to run through into the second position and keep Scott Redding at bay, this has been another good day for the Yamaha squad.
And you know what? That's another good situation for Jonathan Rea. Every time someone takes points off one of his most immediate rivals in the championship, things are smelling rosy for Jonathan Rea as things stand. Redding is relegated to third, far from disastrous it must be said. If things were to stay as they are now, Redding would be 8 points down on Jonathan Rea. Still a long way to go as Michael van der Mark loses ground. It's the second time we've seen that in 2 days. Redding comes through. Van der Mark tries to come back across the curb but can't get there. And through comes Scott Redding for second position. Same problem, I suspect, for Michael van der Mark as we saw yesterday.
Yeah, the false news brilliance there yesterday, and just how much drive he has through that final corner, but he's not close enough to try and attack down the straight on Scott Redding, but maybe for Van der Mark, he can try and make the move down into the braking area into turn one. A little bit too far back for Van der Mark, but he's going to get another opportunity on Scott Redding for sure.
So Van der Mark once again loses that second place. All of this is playing into the hands of the riders behind them because Davies is still keeping up the pace of the front runners, and Bautista likewise. They gained a second on that previous lap over these two as they scrap it out once again. Redding defending. Van der Mark is racing. Van der Mark is clearly faster at this stage of the race than Scott Redding, and once again it seems like only a matter of time. Van der Mark will be cursing the fact that he's given up that position. Through turn 5 we go again. Surely he can't get the move done there for a second time. No, he can't. Redding is wise to it this time around.
Yeah, Redding runs quite a wide line through that corner anyway, but for Van der Mark, it is going to be a case of just trying to make sure he's in the right place at the right time. Still 5.5 laps to go, so Van der Mark will get another opportunity. But the problem with it as well is once you're in the slipstream and once you're behind another rider, even around here in Portimao where we've got the wind blowing, your tyre temperature does go up, and we saw quite a few riders suffering from that in Jerez. Toprak had a bit of an issue with that, and a few other riders. So once you're in that pack, it can be a little bit more difficult. So for Michael van der Mark, it's important to try and make the move when an opportunity presents itself, because once the tyre temperature goes up, the grip goes down.
Van der Mark to Davies, 3 seconds now. Chaz Davies is continuing to make progress. Might be a little bit too late in proceedings here with just over 5 laps to go. Davies, as Van der Mark cut through on the inside line of Scott Redding. Redding has gone very wide there, but a slightly unorthodox line. It's managed to hold in position. He's going wide, he's building up his momentum. That will give him good acceleration, you fancy, off the final turn. Van der Mark, though, is tucked right in. Down the start finish straight they come with 5 laps remaining here in Portimao. The race for second position. Van der Mark has already once got the move done on Scott Redding. It's not going to be at the start of lap 16.
Yeah, he's going to have to wait for another opportunity. You're not going to make it on the run down that long front straight here. You're not going to make it into turn 1. So for Michael van der Mark, it's about trying to stay as close as he can at that point and then see if another chance turns up, because you can see in turn 3 there, Scott Redding just not really as confident as what we've seen from Michael van der Mark. Turn 5, that's the key opportunity, because Scott Redding takes that wide line and opens a door for van der Mark through this section.
Scott Redding then covering the inside line, runs deep at the apex. Van der Mark cuts back to the inside. Redding squarely on the exit. Van der Mark not quite close enough to capitalise for the moment at least. It almost feels as though Van der Mark is just waiting for an opportunity to present itself, because Scott Redding doesn't look comfortable at this stage of the race with less than 5 laps to go. Van der Mark then still picked right to the tail, and it's like Xavi Forés in the gravel trap. It's 2 riders who've gone down. It's Forés and it's also Garrett Gerloff. We're going to see it here.
Down into turn 1, and you can see Gerloff runs wide onto the curb, comes back across, and yeah, just straight to the scene of that accident with Xavi Forés. Forés sees Gerloff out wide, tries to stay tight, and yeah, you'd have to say for Gerloff, having been out wide like that, it left the door open for Forés, and lucky it looks like both of them are going to be okay after that. But for Garrett Gerloff, disappointment there for him, because another decent performance running inside the top 10. That's going to elevate Caricasulo into 8th position. Toprak now up into 9th position,
which is quite an incredible recovery when you think that he went down earlier on in the race. Still back to the fight for second position. Scott Redding just cannot shake Michael van der Mark, but to be perfectly honest, the Dutchman can't find a way through. These two holding one another up, it seems, at this stage of the race. But Chaz Davies has made no further impression, still 3.3 seconds back from the top 3. So it's a shootout for second position here. Van der Mark tighter around turns 1 and 2. Scott Redding, if he can get it stopped into 3 and 5, will make Van der Mark's task that little bit more difficult. He's got it right there through turn number 3, and Scott Redding lives to fight another day. He's defending valiantly in P2.
Yeah, which really means turn 4 is the key corner there for Scott Redding. He needs to maximise that corner so that he's just far enough in front of Van der Mark in this run down into 5, because Scott's looked awkward through turn 5 all the way through the weekend compared to some of the other riders, but it's a style that's been able to work for him in this race.
Look, he's found a line that enables him to stay on, and that's more than a few riders have been able to say around that turn 5. So far here today, it's Jonathan Rea who leads us. 4.5 seconds now, his gap up front from Scott Redding in second. Then it's Michael van der Mark, desperate to get through. Chaz Davies and Alvaro Bautista, their pace has stabilised in 4th and 5th positions. Can't see any big changes further down the order at the moment. So this is the fight to the finish for second place.
Yeah, this is the big fight out on the track, and it's for the big points as well, with 20 points on offer for second position. And Van der Mark, this is as good as we've seen from him really through the whole season. He's been able to have a couple of podiums so far, but this is when he's really started to look like the Michael van der Mark you expect to see. He's been aggressive at times during this race. He's been able to manage that tyre well, and now he's been able to put himself into a position to keep Scott Redding under pressure with just over 3 laps to go.
The only battle further down the order is the tussle of the recovering riders. Razgatlioglu is up to 9th. Leon Haslam is now fighting with Marco Melandri over 12th position, and Eugene Laverty is going with Haslam as well. So a 3-way scrap from 12th position down, and I'm sure that's going to be lively in the closing stages. A good few names there that have a bit of history of going head-to-head down the years. It's Rea who leads it, as you can see, by the best part of 5 seconds. It's Michael van der Mark who's still chasing down Scott Redding, but no change for the moment at least. With less than 3 laps to go, Redding is defending well.
Yeah, Redding doing a good job with that Ducati to maximise where he has to be strong. You can see here with Toprak Razgatlioglu, he's certainly trying to minimise the damage from that crash earlier on. He's closing up on Caricasulo. The gap's about 2 seconds. Last time around, though, Toprak was a second faster.
Wasn't it 6 seconds at one stage that Razgatlioglu had to make up to Caricasulo, so he's certainly coming back at him. That's something, as you said, around about 0.8 of a second a lap faster than Caricasulo, so he will get there at the end if he carries on at that same pace. Haslam almost getting the better of Marco Melandri in the early stages of this lap, and Laverty as well in the fight. So 3 riders really scrapping there over P12 as we see the graphic for Federico Caricasulo. That's Toprak directly behind him. Pick up Caricasulo now. This will be a massive result for him, admittedly in circumstances, but first you've got to finish, as they say.
Yeah, you've got to be able to keep it on the island, and Caricasulo's been able to do that, and now the key thing for him is to be able to make sure he's able to stay in front of Toprak. Toprak on the charge, but for Caricasulo, coming away with a top 10 finish would be a really, really positive step forward.
Plenty of great stories in this race, and another one still in the making with the tussle for second position. 0.4 of a second now the gap from Scott Redding to Michael van der Mark, so it looks as though Redding, for the moment at least, has survived that assault. We come into the penultimate lap, watching Jonathan Rea. It's going to be 3 wins out of 3 for him, his first triple of this 2020 campaign, but look how close Michael van der Mark is again. He's gained loads of ground, a few tenths of a second. He was 4/10 down at one stage on that lap. He's not going to make it into turn number 1. It looks as though it's going to take an error from Scott Redding to see van der Mark back through.
Yeah, van der Mark just doesn't look like he's been able to get close enough to really be aggressive and try and make the move. So the only chance for van der Mark is to hook up turn 3, hook up turn 4, and try and just put himself in a position to try and force a move on the last lap down in towards turn 5. He has managed to get through on Scott, of course, but then he had that problem up at the top of turn 13.
Scott Redding then again defending to the inside line, a slightly unorthodox racing line around turn 5, but he's made it work for him. Scott Redding still defending that second place with Michael van der Mark. The gap oscillating between the two of them. Further back, I mentioned Leon Haslam fighting his way through. He has now picked off Marco Melandri for 12th position, and Eugene Laverty is next in line to have a go at Melandri, who frankly is around about a second a lap off the pace of the likes of Haslam. He's more similar perhaps to the pace of Laverty, but we might find out in the closing stages. Melandri just attempting to hold on, really. He has been off the pace, benefiting from the incidents around him to move up into the point scoring positions.
Yeah, and it's for him, it's been as far up the field as we've seen from him. You can see from Toprak, though, he's been able to make some progress there and get through in Caricasulo. So he's been able to make up a lot of ground over the last few laps, and at least he's been able to find himself able to still score some points. This is down into turn 5. You can see for Toprak there, he's still willing to slide his bike on the entry into 5, and he was able to hold the line, and Caricasulo wasn't, and very easy move there for Toprak to be able to get himself up into 8th position, pick up another point.
Yes, I think Caricasulo was doing his long lap penalty there as Razgatlioglu cuts through on the inside line in pretty straightforward fashion for 8th place. Too far to bridge to make any further progress, but that's a decent recovery. We turn our attentions back to the fight for second position. This has been almost half the race now with these two duking it out. It's Redding who holds it for the moment on the duke, and it's Michael van der Mark, who's going to try and find his way through for second position. There's going to be a bold move at some stage here from van der Mark.
Well, van der Mark taking that wide, sweeping, normal line through turn 3. He wants to make sure he's able to carry the speed on the run down in towards turn 5. This is close as we've seen from him, but it's hard to get close to that Ducati, even on a short shoot like this.
Scott Redding has generally defended the inside line anyway around turn number 5. Is he going to get it stopped in time? He's a little bit deep. Van der Mark is almost alongside. They're close. They almost touch. Michael van der Mark almost touching the back wheel there of Scott Redding, and he had to back off it as well. Redding defends that place successfully.
Yeah, Redding able to just keep that speed through the mid-corner, and van der Mark carrying a lot more speed. Just lucky he had to shut off through there. So for van der Mark, he's still trying to get himself close.
Wow, it's close as they come over the crest of the hill. We've seen Michael van der Mark getting air there through this weekend. Not on this occasion. He's got air behind him, but not in front of him. He's right on the tail of Scott Redding. Can he find his way through? He's wrestling that Yamaha as he attempts to make that manoeuvre for second place.
Yeah, the only option for van der Mark is going to be into the next right-hander, but it's going to be very difficult to make that move on Scott Redding. You're going to have to really send it. It looks like he's a bit too far back to try and make a move.
Van der Mark thinking about a manoeuvre as they come into the final sector of the final lap. It's going to be close in the run down to the line. Scott Redding has defended beautifully in second place. It's the type of ride that championships are made of on a day where he wasn't expected to challenge at the front on the back of 2 relatively disappointing results. He is defending second place successfully. It's 3 out of 3 for Jonathan Rea, but it's Scott Redding, his championship rival, who comes home in second position. A good look over the shoulder for Jonathan Rea to see which of his contenders it was taking the runner-up slot, and it's Redding. Van der Mark gets third. Chaz Davies in 4th position. That's a good result for him. Fantastic result for Alvaro Bautista here this afternoon in 5th position. Then it's Rinaldi Pax, a little bit underwhelming on that Ducati. Tom Sykes in 7th place. I think that's going to be his best result of the season in a feature-length ride. Razgat Lioglu recovering to 8th position after problems for Caricasulo. Mercado gets 10th. That's a big improvement for him. Garrett Gerloff recovering well to P11. And then what about that battle for 12th position? Because according to the time screens, it's Laverty versus Haslam, and I think Laverty's just nicked that back in the run down to the line. Yes, Eugene Laverty claims 12th position, so Haslam found his way past Melandri for 12th place. Laverty's picked off Melandri and then Haslam as well, so that's a good result for Eugene Laverty in 12th in the end. Bit of damage limitation further down the order from 8th position down. You can list the catalogue of errors for the majority of those riders, but they've all managed to come home and get points, so points on the board, that could be crucial later on in the season. But 25 big points on the board for Jonathan Rea.
Yeah, and for Jonathan Rea, it's been an absolutely perfect weekend. He's had pole position, 3 wins, 3 fastest laps. Weekends don't get much better than that for the 5-time world champion. He's been able to put himself back to the top of the standings, which at least means going to Aragon, he's given himself the best chance. We know that the Ducati's going to be strong in Aragon, but we also know that Kawasaki are going to be testing there for 2 days this week as well. So they're going to have the opportunity to at least have everything nailed down before the start of that race weekend.
Brilliant run of the positions gained graphic. Chaz Davies will be lucking in as far as gaining a Hyundai at the end of this season is concerned, as he takes 4th position there. That's 9 places gained, 7 places gained for Bautista, 7 gained for Mercado, even Marco Melandri gaining 4 positions. It was certainly action-packed, but you don't often see that number of crashes, that number of falls in a race of a standard of this World Superbike Championship. That was a very unusual situation. The riders pushing hard in race 2.
Yeah, and that's why it's hard to be too critical on the riders for having crashes, because clearly it was on a bit of a knife edge through turn 5 for everyone with the track temperatures we have here, and clearly it just caught out a lot of riders. It's unfortunate.
Remember, we lost 4 riders altogether during that race. Xavi Forés going down. He came off worse for wear in a collision with Garrett Gerloff. Alex Lowe's having to retire to the pits after going down, and Loris Bat's a high-speed incident through the final sector. So hopefully all of the riders involved in crashes A and OK there, but all of those riders losing points in terms of the championship. Baz dropping backwards down to 8th position. Lowe's dropping back from the pace and the points of the top 2. And Razgat Lioglu, even though he's come home in 8th position, that's the first sign of weakness we've really seen from him in 2020.
Yeah, the first mistake, but at least still able to get himself up and still score some points. You can see down there, Mark Vermey, Michael van der Mark, hugged from his crew, and he should be pretty pleased with that, because 2 podiums in the feature races this weekend. Good performance from the Dutchman.
Well, we were asking the question as to what Scott Redding could answer with in this race number 2, and he's answered with a 2nd place that I must say is against the grain of form this weekend. So that is a ride for which he's had to dig really deep
Yeah, good performance by Reading to pick up those 20 points. Clearly learning the lessons through the course of the weekend. Didn't have the answers for Jonathan Ray, but no one had the answer for Jonathan Ray this weekend. For Scott Reading, though, he was able to defend his position well. For Michael van der Mark, able to use the strengths of the Ducati well. But for van der Mark, he had one opportunity to get through. He took it, and then there was a mistake made after that. And unfortunately for van der Mark, that was his one opportunity.
Yes, if the question to answer was, is Jonathan Ray going to win again, then I think we all had the answer. Jonathan Ray is victorious by a 4-second margin over Scott Reading. It's 3 out of 3 here at the Algarve International Circuit for Ray. Second place going the way of Reading, with Michael van der Mark only fractionally behind in third. What could have been for van der Mark, because he certainly had already made the move once on Scott Reading, just couldn't repeat that for a second time. Chaz Davies with a creditable fourth place on the pace, but he'd already dropped too much ground in the early stages coming from further down the order. Alvaro Bautista benefiting from a fall for his teammate Leon Haslam, claims 5th position, so that's his best of the season so far. Michael Ruben Rinaldi perhaps a little bit underwhelming in only 6th position. Tom Sykes in 7th, then Razgatlioglu, Caricasulo and Tati Mercado with a season's best in 10th. As far as what that does in terms of the championship, damage limitation for Scott Reading. He does lose the lead of the series standings. It's Jonathan Ray who moves 4 points clear. Then it's Razgatlioglu, 33 points back from Ray. Lowe's losing big time by failing to score. That's real disappointment for him. Michael van der Mark closing in the race for 4th position. Chaz Davies also picking up decent points, and Bautista moves above Baz and Rinaldi into 7th place overall. Baz, Rinaldi and Sykes now rounding out the top 10 in the championship standings. So plenty of action to dissect in that race number 2, and a lot of it was falls and major incidents for some of the big players in this championship.
Yeah, definitely. It was a race of attrition and a race of avoiding mistakes, and the 3 riders there on the podium did the best job possible to do that. It's good, though, that we saw Chaz Davies make a step forward. Alvaro Bautista made a step forward as well to finish inside the top 5 in his Honda, and that's what you want to see. You want to see those teams learning, making progress. We know what Chaz Davies can do whenever he's got the Ducati working right, and he's certainly going to be able to bring that form to Aragon, and it should be the same for this man, Michael van der Mark. 2 podiums this weekend here in Portimao.
Michael back on the podium in race 2, just missing out on P2, but what a battle that was with the Ducati.
Yeah, I'm really happy with this race. From the start I was a bit slow, but not slow, I just stayed consistent pace and people were making mistakes. And I just kept doing my rhythm, and you know, I felt quite good. I struggled a little bit still at the front tire, but at the end I was with Scott, and I wasn't a lot strong. I was fast, but I wasn't stronger, so I had to wait till he made a mistake, and you know, I went in front, and again I hit neutral again, so lost that gap, and after I just couldn't pass him. You know, we had a similar level. He was stronger on the points than I was, but I'm really happy with this podium. The temperatures went up again, and the bike felt better than yesterday. So massive thanks to the team, because this morning I was really disappointed.
Thank you, Michael.
Again, that false neutral problem for Michael van der Mark, who is unable to recover this time around. He did a valiant job last time that happened, of course, to fight back to the positions that he'd lost. On this occasion, Scott Reading played a blinder, just defending the line perfectly in the closing stages.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can do whenever you're up against that Ducati, and Scott's putting it in the right places out on track. And for van der Mark, did what he could, comes away with another podium.
We saw it in the hands of Mercado, the way it pulled away off the final turn.
Yeah, exactly. When we rode on board with Top Rack for that, you could see just how difficult it was going to be for van der Mark to get himself up into 2nd position. But again, he's able to at least keep the pressure on. He's able to score good points, and he's able to keep himself closing in on his teammate Top Rack and Alex Lowe's in that battle for 3rd in the World Championship. Here's Scott Reading, though, 2nd place in Portimao and 2nd place overall in the World Championship standings.
Scott, it's been such a difficult weekend until now, but you've managed to turn it around in race 2 and a good 20 points on the board.
Yeah, it was a really hard weekend for us. I'm not gonna lie. We was kind of doing damage limitation, but I knew I can ride for the podium, but the bike just wasn't really working that easy here for us. You can maybe see on the TV I'm struggling a lot, and I really wanted to get a podium here because I know Johnny was going to win all 3 races after I saw the pace, but it's okay. You can have tracks like that suit bikes better, but it's not acceptable to finish 5th, and I think 7 is not ideal. So we changed a lot the bike. In the warm-up lap it felt really bad, and I thought, oh no, I said, guys, I just don't feel good. I said, anyway, it's there, forget about it, try and work, and I felt good, and I could run with Johnny for quite a few laps, and my target was just get a gap and then manage, because I know I was going to suffer at the end here, and you know, I managed to pull out second. I think that's the best job we could do here today on that race.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, guys.
That's a massive result for Scott Redding in the context of the championship.
It's a big result because at least he goes to Aragon with the confidence that they made a step in race 2 here in Portimao, because obviously if you look at the overall results from the weekend, round by round, how did you do? You gave up an awful lot of points to Jonathan Rea, and you lost the championship lead. I think it was probably 25, 26 points that Scott's given up to Jonathan Rea, but at least he'll have the confidence that they learned from it and they made the step forward for race 2, and that will give him a little lift going into Aragon. And for Jonathan Rea, he'll have plenty of confidence knowing that he's been able to take a big chunk of points out of his rival. So both of those guys are going to go to Aragon with a reason to have their tail up.
Yes, Scott Redding certainly setting himself very high standards, as he was saying there that he really felt that 7th place wasn't good enough in race 1. He was 5th earlier on today, but as we're seeing here, he cuts his way through the field very nicely indeed. Scott Redding taking 2nd place, and a credit to Chaz Davies for 4th position as well.
Yeah, Chaz Davies with a good ride there in 4th on the Ducati V4R, so it's getting what he could out of this day's racing, because starting from the 5th row of the grid, it was always going to be very difficult for him to finish any better than a top 5 spot. But for Chaz Davies, at least again, like in Jerez, plenty of progress, and that's the main thing.
Yes, hard work for Chaz Davies from 13th position to fight his way through up into P4, and he had good pace, as you say, in the latter stages of that one. Bit of a debrief for Razgatlioglu, as we said, his first mistake of this season so far, and he was in the mix with the battle, and down he went at the apex of turn 5.
Yeah, you could see there from Top Rack, probably on the bike, he's feeling that that crash is going to happen for a very long time, and he's hoping to be able to keep it up. He said in Jerez he tried to save it like Marc Marquez on his warm-up lap for race 2, but unfortunately Top Rack not able to keep that bike up, but able to at least get himself back up inside the top 10.
Yes, unfortunately he went down like Marquez, but thankfully he was able to get back up to his feet and come over the line in 8th position. In the meanwhile, our new championship leader, let's hear from Jonathan Rea.
Johnny, a hat-trick of wins this weekend, and you leave here for the first time this year as a championship leader. A perfect way to finish Sunday.
Yeah, you know, I can't believe it, to come in here 24 back and to go out leading the championship's incredible. Especially after I had some worries. You know, we didn't come here winter testing this year when all the other teams did, and I rode terrible on FP1, and I was starting to panic a little bit, but I could see my pace in the races was very good. Especially at the end, I could you know, do exactly what I wanted. So this race, I just needed to keep the pace strong in the beginning with Scott. I knew sooner or later the cord would break, and I could just manage with my pit board, and it was incredible. My team gave me a great bike, although today the wind picked up quite a lot, so there was a few sketchy moments I had coming over the hill where the front was rolling, so that was enough to tap me in the shoulder and just say, hey, look at these 25 points and move on to Motorland in a few weeks.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Jonathan Rea victorious by 4 seconds here today over Scott Redding. More celebrations for him. But I think the important thing about this weekend is we've seen Jonathan Rea take the maximum out of a circuit that benefits him. We've seen Scott Redding put in a damage limitation ride, particularly in race number 2. We expect that the roles could well be reversed in Aragon next time out.
You'd certainly expect them to be reversed in Aragon. That's going to be a Ducati circuit, so the key thing for Jonathan Rea at Aragon is to be able to do what he did in the opening 2 rounds of the year, pick up a Super Pole race victory, get as many points as you can, try and do anything you can in those races to give yourself half a chance, because in Aragon last year we saw just how good that Ducati was. Alvaro Bautista, that we can see here now, with Bautista able to finish inside the top 5 today, but last year at Aragon he was just able to drive away from the field. That's what you expect from Ducati this year as well.
I always love seeing the massive Honda engineers waiting on every word from their riders. A great amount of respect for their ultimate professionals. 2 very experienced riders, of course, in that outfit.
Yeah, Honda are leaving no stone unturned, and that's why it's just a case of waiting until they really get the most out of that package. For Bautista, in these feature-length races, he's done a really good job of managing the tyre and controlling his pace. You can see there he's got that red flash on his rear tyre. He's out there on the SCX rear tyre, and he's been able to make that last all the way through the 20 laps and pick off the likes of Ronaldo, you can see there, to finish inside the top 5. So it shows that the potential of that package is there, and once they're able to understand it fully, they'll be able to really get themselves into the fight.
Entertaining and action-packed race right the way through the order. It is now time for our podium. Michael van der Mark in third position, Scott Redding in second, and Jonathan Ray on the top step. 3 wins out of 3 for Ray. It had been Raz Gatlioglu second in both race 1 and the Superpole race, but he came to grief at turn 5, one of several victims around that knife edge hairpin, and so it's Scott Redding who takes his opportunity to move up into second place, and you can see that he's pleased with that, not least because, as he said during his interview, he knew that that was the most he could achieve today.
Yeah, and for Scott, that's definitely all you can do whenever you're trying to win a world championship. It's not about trying to win every race, it's trying to win every round, as Jonathan Ray has always said. And for Scott Redding, he's able to walk away with a decent result from today, and it means that he's at least been able to keep things a little bit competitive all the way through the weekend.
Well, it's certainly Ray and the KRT team that have won this weekend. It's time for the national anthems.
Winners' national anthem, the national anthem of Great Britain. Now the national
anthem of the winning manufacturer.
And as the riders get a little bit busy with the Prosecco...
It's time for the Prosecco then for our podium trio, and what a podium trio they are. Immediately, Jonathan Ray spraying his tyre mechanic, who's come up to receive the team award. Ray victorious here today then alongside him. Scott Redding, well, we've been told by Jonathan Ray not to focus too much on the head-to-head between himself and Scott Redding, but it certainly looks as though those two are going to be the ones to beat in 2020. 2 weeks off now for SBK stars before we return to Spain for back-to-back weekends at Motorland Aragon. First up, it's the Prosecco DOC Aragon round, followed immediately by the Pirelli Teruel round. The first time since 2000 that WorldSBK has visited the same venue twice in a single season. In the meanwhile, welcome back to Portimao as we go through the results and the amended championship standings after race 2 and at the end of a fascinating third weekend of this 2020 campaign. Race 2 results, Jonathan Ray wins it by 4 seconds over Scott Redding. Michael van der Mark directly behind just couldn't find a way through for a second time, having lost that position. Charles Davies takes 4th place, 8 seconds down on the race winner. Then it's Alvaro Bautista with a season's best 5th. Michael Ruben Rinaldi, a quiet affair for him after being picked off by Bautista. Tom Sykes with a decent 7th, his best result in a full-length race this season. Tati Mercado, his best score of the campaign for 10th. Eugene Laverty fighting back well to pick up 12th. Problems for Leon Haslam as well in 13th. And disastrous lack of pace for Marco Melandri, who was beaten there by multiple riders who actually had falls during the action. So a lot of work to do for Melandri before he turns up in Aragon. In fact, he said yesterday that his attentions have already turned to trying to find some extra pace next time out. Riders' Championship after round 3, it's Jonathan Ray then who leads the way, and Ray who has managed to overcome Scott Redding in the series standings through the course of this weekend. Good performance, but disappointing for Raz Gatlioglu and Lowe's, both of whom have lost points big style there with falls in race 2. Lowe's, of course, retiring from the action. Independent Riders Championship, Loris Baz it is who leads the way by a single point over Michael Ruben Rinaldi. The gap narrowed, of course, with Baz's incident in the early stages. And in the Teams Championship, it's still KRT out in front, 20 points clear of the Aruba IT Racing Ducati. They need to get a few extra points out of Chaz Davies to challenge at the top. Ray and Lowe's both inside the top 5 in the championship standings. Independent Teams Championship, and much like the Independent Riders Championship, it's 54 points to 53 in favour of Tenkate over Team Go 11, Baz versus Rinaldi. And in the Manufacturers Championship, Ducati leapfrog Yamaha still close at the top, but Kawasaki have made big gains thanks to the efforts of Jonathan Ray this weekend. Honda, BMW and Aprilia rounding out the 6 manufacturers in WorldSBK. Hyundai-inspired rider, as I said at the time, Chaz Davies making up the most positions here today. Alvaro Bautista also coming through well, and Marco Melandri didn't make up as many positions as he might have liked if he wants that Hyundai at the end of this season. 8 points the gap from first to third there. Superbike World Championship returns to the track in just under 3 weeks' time for the Aragon doubleheader that looks set to mark the halfway stage in this 2020 campaign. Still one race to come though from